All right, we're back with another episode of the Northwest Sports Podcast with Kyle Smith. This week, we're continuing our MLB season preview coverage, and we're going to be talking about the NL Central. We're going to start it off with the defending champs, the St. Louis Cardinals. Kyle Smith, would you like to get into the Cardinals and how great they are?
I just want to say that a couple years ago, the St. Louis Cardinals started using a certain series of advanced metrics that are now being followed by a lot of the other teams in MLB, and you can see why. I mean, every single year they have one of the most impressive lists of top 100 prospects. They do a great deal of mixing and matching young talent with veteran upside. You know, Carlos Beltran's a perfect example of that. And this year's lineup is no exception. They've done everything they could to make subtle, discreet moves without making any blunders. The Peralta signing, I think, is a little bit subjective when you consider how much money they have because of their new deal. The fact that they're not really paying... They're paying Adam Wainwright the same amount of money. Maybe even... Isn't it like even $5 million less than what Homer Bailey just got?
It's less than Homer Bailey, yeah.
Yeah, and he's clearly the better player.
And then another thing about the money situation is...
No.
The money that they could have given to Pujols, they used that to extend Alan Craig and Adam Wainwright. So, looking at their lineup, it's just loaded everywhere. They're called up their prospect, Colton Wong, to be the everyday second baseman. They're moving Matt Carpenter, the man who led the National League in hits last year, to third base. They've re-signed Peralta. Alan Craig and Matt Adams are going to split time at first base. They're really just loading up on this hitting. Oscar Taveras is still on the way as a prospect. He hasn't yet been cleared for baseball activities, but he's a top 5 hitting prospect. He's on the level of a Gregory Polanco and all these other toolsy outfielders that can really come in and make an immediate impact in May or even at the start of the year. In Polanco's case, they made a move to trade for Peter Burgos to try to take over that center field spot. So in the offseason, they spent their money to solve their two biggest issues in the lineup, in Peralta and Burgos. So, Kyle, how do you think those two moves are going to make this lineup more whole and more complete?
Well, I like the trade for Burgos because, you know, you already had a guy who was capable in Matt Carpenter sliding into that third base spot. And as you know, or as many Ranger fans may know who David Freese is, he came on as a late prospect, a la Jim Adducci last year. Kind of just one of those drifter guys, so to get that kind of value, elite center fielder defensively was a great move for the Cardinals. They'll be able to use him and Jay in a platoon.
Yeah. And
Jay is a very underrated center fielder, also a very underrated hitter. He kind of took a little bit of a step back last year, but I would expect him to be just as good as he always is, which is, you know, right around a 350 OBP with about a 290 batting average. I mean, he's hit 300 twice and 297 once, but I think it's a little bit more realistic to expect around 290 and 350. That being said, I think that the second base position is the only question mark. Bringing in Mark Ellis was a good move for them. Kind of gives them that veteran leadership. He's a very set-by-example type player.
He can help Colton Wong get adjusted to playing every day.
Without having to play Wong every day, which is nice.
And then, of course, Wong will probably be batting 7th in the lineup most days, so you'll have zero pressure on him.
Yeah, and that's almost giving him the benefit of the doubt. He might even hit lower than that. Wong is the guy who I'm not really that sold on, but in a lineup like this, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I mean, even if he hits 225,
then you have Mark Ellis to come in and hit 250.
Yeah, and you had Cosmo last year doing the same thing.
Cosmo's not good.
It did not hurt them at all. So I think this is going to be a really great lineup. You've got power, speed, agility, just about everything you can look for. They are hoping a little bit on staying free of the injury bug. We know Alan Craig has those issues. Holiday is a bit of an older player who could probably get hurt at any time, just because he hasn't been hurt. Adams is a big boy. I like him at first base. I don't think he's going to get hurt. Molina, the Cardinals really struggled when Molina went down last year for a short period of time, but that's something to keep an eye on. As far as like looking at their starting lineup, you say to yourself, wow, this lineup's pretty much indestructible, but injuries can happen to the best of any team. It's the most unpredictable thing in sports. So that being said, I think that's going to be their main weakness going into this year is the possible injury questions. Looking at some of their top prospects, Josh, who do you kind of feel is going to make the biggest impact as far as on this offense before we get to the pitchers?
I mentioned Tavares, and if Holiday does go down, assuming he's ready and has gotten back into game shape, he's the obvious candidate. But another player that I think we need to keep our eye on is Stephen Piscotty. He's a minor league guy who can play a few different positions, and he's solid with the bat. Not a top 100 guy or anything really. Pretty much, I mean, he's kind of fringy, but he should be able to step in and be very productive. And Kyle, after you answer your own question, I would like to ask you another question of who do you think is the best hitter on St. Louis?
I think the best hitter on St. Louis, without a doubt, is Craig.
Really?
If you were to see his spray chart last year combined with his in the zone hitting, he covers inside pitch, outside pitch. He gets down in the corners. He gets up in the corners. He's by far, when healthy, in my opinion, one of the best hitters in baseball. I think that he doesn't get credit for it because he's always injured and because he's still somewhat of an unknown commodity because of the injuries. And the fact that he's not really he's a Cardinals player. I feel like Cardinals players tend to just go under the radar in general because of how the organization handles their PR. But I really see him as probably the best bat. I think Molina had a great season last year, but I don't know if that's really the norm for him, even though he's a good hitter. So, who do you feel like? I mean, obviously Carpenter was a stud last year, but do you think that translates again?
The first two guys that popped in my head were Matt Carpenter, who just had an incredible fringy MVP type season last year. Almost a 400 on base with almost a 500 slugging, but he only had 11 homers. And the way you get 500 slugging with only 11 homers is by having 55 doubles. So I believe he led the National League in doubles. And him moving to third is also going to improve the team defense. And the other batter that, while old, is still swinging the bat really well, even though the power's starting to fade a bit, is Matt Holliday.
Yeah.
Matt Holliday's fantastic, and he's really good still, and he's the type of hitter that should be able to age really well in terms of carrying that on base and kind of being that 20-25 homer guy. So if he can stay healthy, he can still be really good, and that was a really good contract that they signed him to. It really worked out.
I never understood why the Rockies didn't match that.
Because he was on Oakland.
Oh,
they traded him, and That's how Colorado got Carlos Gonzalez.
Oh, that's right. I just read that the other day too.
Yeah.
So all a good deal, but they totally should have re-signed him back.
So moving on to the starting rotation, which is just loaded with options and aces and potential aces. It's really fun to look at all the pitchers they have. Obviously, Adam Wainwright. Every year he's healthy, he's a Cy Young candidate for the foreseeable future. And then you come with Shelby Miller, Michael Wacha, two young pitchers who prove they can get it done in the major leagues. You got Lance Lynn, Joe Kelly, two reliable veterans who can get the job done and take the ball every 5 days. And you got your question marks with Jaime Garcia and Carlos Martinez if they're going to keep trying to him as a starting pitcher. I, for one, think Shelby Miller is still better than Michael Wacha. I do like Michael Wacha, but he obviously pitched better at the end of the year, but I feel like a good amount of that had to do with the wear and tear on Miller's arm and him kind of getting dead arm. So, Kyle, your thoughts on the starting rotation?
Yeah, I expect Michael Wacha to take a bit of a step back. I think he's got good stuff, but I don't think he's got tremendous sink on his fastball, which I think is going to hurt him. You can only pitch for contact so much before guys start really catching on to what you're doing. That being said, I do like his lively fastball, and I think that he's got Wainwright's definitely in the back of his head teaching him that 12-6. I've seen him throw it a couple times so far in spring training. It's been pretty impressive, but at the same time, that's not really the pitch that you want to bank on because it's such a variable the way it's going to land, whether it's in the mid or if it goes down into the ground, especially with that type of come out right when it at the release point.
Having Molina certainly helps with his amazing defensive abilities as a catcher.
Yeah, I definitely expect his starting rotation to be really good. I think Biller's going to be a good pitcher. I think he slightly outperformed his ability last year. I don't see him being that type of pitcher again. But I think Lance Lynn's a total innings eater. I really admire his game, the way he gets it done. He does it with a lot of moxie, which is something I always look for in a player. Garcia is one of those guys who, if he can stay healthy, is definitely going to contribute. And you mentioned Kelly, who's not even listed as a relief pitcher or a starting pitcher for them, which I find a little bit perplexing. So I don't really understand why he's not listed. I think he's a good pitcher, great innings eater. Either way, they're a healthy staff going into the season. They don't have injury issues. If Rosenthal struggles in the pen, they've got Mott, who they can slide back into that role, or Martinez. I think Choate's a pretty good setup man. I really like a lot of their options, and I just think that they continue to show why they're one of the strongest organizations in the league off their tremendous pitching depth. I mean, this is I don't think there's a team in baseball that has a better staff than this, especially with so much upside.
Yeah, absolutely agree. This is the model franchise right now on how to build a team from the ground up. If you look at their roster, there's so many homegrown talents they got through the draft and international scouting, and it really helps you keep costs down, and it makes it easier to re-sign your players. You build that family atmosphere. You have continuity in the front office. Your fan base is obviously one of the best in baseball, always has been, and they kind of grow up that with, supporting Wainwright, then you extend him, and then, it just helps Wainwright become even more of a face of the pitching staff, and then, Alan Craig types, and, the way they scout players in the draft is very unique, as Kyle brought up at the beginning, and they're just the model franchise, and in my opinion, for the foreseeable future, they will be one of the favorites in the National League, for sure.
Yeah, It's almost sad that they're in the same division as the Reds. And just because I think the Reds are also one of those teams that just develops their own talent really, really well. And so I feel like they'd almost get more credit for that if they weren't in the NL Central with literally the best scouting team in baseball. So that being said, we fully expect the Cardinals to win how many games?
96.
I think they'll win 100.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. So, speaking of predictions...
That's not really that different.
Yeah. So speaking of predictions, let's go into some over-unders for the St. Louis Cardinals before we move on to the Cincinnati Reds. So, Adam Wainwright, over-under a top 3 Cy Young finish.
I'm going to say over. I think he does it.
Oh, you think he wins it?
Yeah.
It's your early prediction is that Wainwright takes it from Kershaw?
I don't know if he takes it. Man. I'm just going to say over on the top 3.
Okay, I'll take the under on that.
Yeah.
Trevor Rosenthal, over under 40 saves.
I'm going to go ahead and say under. I don't think he closes all year. I've been impressed by his stuff. I just don't think he's as good as Mott, in my opinion. If Mott hadn't went down, there's no way Rosenthal gets that job. And that's the way I look at it.
Right, I will take the over. I think he leads the National League in saves. Yep. Michael Wacha, over under ERA of 3 for next season.
Over.
Okay, I will agree with you. Yadier Molina. Okay, over under 15 home runs.
I'm going to say over because I think he was pretty good last year, and without that little injury spat, I think he probably could have got there. He did have 12 home runs last year. He had 22 the year before, and roughly the exact same plate appearances, so I think he'll get over 15.
Okay. Matt Adams. Does he start the majority of St. Louis's games at first base?
Yes.
Okay, I will agree with you.
Although, if he does struggle and Tavares is healthy or Jay is playing well, I wouldn't be surprised. They're kind of a no BS team. And in order to cut back on the injuries of Alan Craig, I wouldn't be surprised to see him slot over there. But I don't expect him to struggle. I think he's got enough power to keep him in the lineup. It's really, him and Holiday are really the only big power bats they have, so.
Yeah, and even Holiday isn't a
Not even
30
really,
home run guy
yeah,
anymore.
Not anymore, but he's always that guy you have to worry about leaving one over
Right.
the plate on.
And speaking of Matt Holiday, will he get over under 25 home runs?
I'm gonna say under, or yeah, under. I just don't know if he's gonna be able to do it this year. I think that there's gonna be a really tough lineup to pitch, and I just think that because he is one of the only guys in that lineup that has that power, or at least a semblance of power, that he's gonna be the guy who they're not afraid to pitch to.
Right.
Just because he has shown that he can whiff a little bit. So.
And I will agree he will be under. And the last one of my favorite players, Matt Carpenter, over under 40 doubles.
Over.
Okay, I will agree with you.
I just think that guy is. He just so good. He never looks even remotely rattled. He just looks like he's just out there like a robot.
Yeah, Matt Carpenter's really good. And I'm a big fan of his. I was really happy for his success in another one of the St. Louis's players that wasn't drafted that high that really developed well and, just plays the game, quote unquote, the right way.
Yeah.
So, moving on to the Cincinnati Reds. They certainly had an interesting offseason. Sin-Chu Chu left to go to the Texas Rangers. They gave Homer Bailey a very big extension. There were rumors about Brandon Phillips getting moved to the Yankees for Brett Gardner, and among other potential trade avenues, Toronto was another potential option. This is a team that is also very well built from the ground up, but this offseason they didn't really do too much to really improve themselves externally, and I feel like that's really going to bite them going forward.
Yeah. I was surprised they didn't get in on the Michael Bourne sweepstakes last year. For what he ended up signing for, I thought that was totally something they could have afforded. It was a position of need. I like the Chu pickup, but at the same time,
You could have done both.
You could have done both, yeah. And you wouldn't have had to bank on Ludwig and Hamilton, which we'll get to in a sec. So yeah, when you look at this lineup, how do you feel slotting the lineup, at least at this point? Do you think Hamilton leads off? Do you think he's ready for that type of responsibility? Because there are some really big question marks as far as how are you going to set up this alignment to maximize productivity. We all know the problem with Joey Votto. Well, the alleged problem with Joey Votto.
It's not a problem.
That he takes too many walks.
That's bullshit.
I'm on the fence on it because you can get all the... I definitely think that a walk is a productive at-bat no matter how you look at it. But there comes a certain point where if somebody's going to... If they're not intentionally walking you and they're at least trying to strike you out, you have to be a little bit aggressive and try and drive those runners in, especially knowing that you're the main guy to do it.
I mean, I completely disagree. He had 57 extra base hits last year. He had 177 hits. He had a 440 on-base percentage. This guy is an incredible hitter, and just because he doesn't hit 30 home runs doesn't mean he can't hit third in the order.
Oh, it's not about home runs for me. It's about the fact that...
He had 177 hits.
Yeah, but 4 years ago he had 113 RBIs. The next year he had 103 RBIs. The next year 56.
That's not his fault that no one's on base in front of him.
I don't think that's what it is.
Well, how do you explain then that Brandon Phillips' RBI totals continue to go up and up? Now, he went 77 in 2012, 103 in 2013, mainly because of Cho and Votto. And RBIs are just...
He bats second, right?
He batted second for a lot of the year, yeah. And speaking of Brandon Phillips, he's really entertaining, fantastic player to watch in the field. He's not really that good of a batter.
Oh, he's all right, but you're
What's
right.
his on-base percentage last year? 310. The year before that, 321.
Yeah.
So, and then in 2011, he was 353 and a really good hitter. And he's really just maybe he's not focusing on the walks and play discipline because of the allure of the RBI.
Maybe.
That might be something that he can just fix.
Yeah.
I still think he's a really good player. His contract might be a little high, but I don't even think it's that outrageous. The player that, for the Reds, that I'm most underwhelmed by in terms of their overall development is Jay Bruce.
Yeah.
And I don't
Taking
mean
a
to
while.
say that because Jay Bruce isn't a bad player. His WAR was above 5 last year. He had 30 home runs. He has great power. He's a solid defender. I just was expecting more. That's all I'm kind of getting with this. I was expecting 280, 380, 530, like MVP type numbers, especially in that ballpark.
Well, if he could get on base like the rest of his team, I mean,
Yeah.
if he had a 350 on base percentage, this guy would be possibly a perennial MVP candidate.
Exactly.
And so it's always disappointing seeing that. But I still think, all things considered, he made a major step forward. But that's also to say that in 2010, which is 2 years after he was in the majors, he had a 4.5 WAR, where he dropped down the next 2 years to 1.814 and then back up to 5.1. So you might be looking here at a very variable commodity.
Yeah,
And so
like you can
you
count
can't-
on the homers and maybe that's it. Like those strikeout numbers are ridiculously bad.
Yeah.
Hit 185 last year. That's not good. That was 30 more than the year before, and only 5 more games played.
Yeah, it's definitely not looking good for him. But at the same time, he's got to be the man. The Cincinnati Reds have done a great job of developing talent. Mostly, I would say probably their pitching staff is going to be the thing that carries them this year. And they really need Cueto to stay healthy because without him, it's kind of a full rotation.
Right,
Because
but-
they don't really have that fifth guy to step in just yet.
Before we get into the rotation, which I actually like,
Yeah.
we have to talk about the Billy Hamilton issue.
Oh, yeah.
We brought him up as if he could lead off or not, but I want to spend a few moments on this. And for those of you that don't know, Billy Hamilton is a converted shortstop that was moved to center fielder, expecting the team not to re-sign Cho. Good idea. The issue is what Billy Hamilton does incredibly well is he may be the fastest player in baseball. In the minors, he broke the stolen base record. He's the type of player that could, if he were to be able to get on base, could challenge Ricky Henderson's steals records. That's not a joke. He can
Not
do
a
that.
joke at all.
He's incredibly gifted defensively in center fielder because of his speed and his legs. But the issue is he is very slender. He's about 5'11", 155, and with that lack of strength, he has a really hard time getting any loft on the ball and getting on base to create havoc when he gets on base. So, with all that said, Kyle, I don't think he's ready to even play in the majors from a batting perspective.
I would agree with you, but I think there's just something about Hamilton that's like an intangible factor. Like you can't put your hands on it. You can't see it on paper. You can't pinpoint it with an advanced metric, or maybe you can and somebody just hasn't informed me yet. But the guy who, and this may sound like a little bit crazy of a comparison, but I'm just saying, like this is who he kind of reminds me of, is like a Coco Crisp type. Of like, not necessarily with the home runs, who had 22 home runs last year. Hamilton will never get there.
No.
But it's not always about the average. It's about how you get on base. This is a guy that could drop a bunt twice a game and get on base. I mean, I'm not saying that's like the best strategy in the world, but he's gonna, like, he pretty much has 5 hits against Matt Garza every time he goes up against him.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, if you don't have a supremely athletic pitcher out there that can field all those balls, he's gonna wreak havoc on you, and as soon as he gets on base, it's a triple.
Well,
It's a guaranteed triple almost.
The issue, counteracting your point, is that his lack of strength allows the third baseman to creep up very far.
That's true.
And you can also kind of just bring your entire infield in.
Yeah.
And then bring your outfield in, because if he gets the ball in the air and it drops, he's probably only going for a single. And then you just have to worry about the stolen base anyway.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you won't see in the stats, like you're saying, is he's going to create so many missed throws for catchers trying to rush their coming out of their stance, pop up, get him at second. There are going to be a lot of baseballs flying into center field this year when you face Cincinnati.
Yeah, no, and I that's a very good point, and I think that as teams start to come in on him, that might make him a more successful hitter because those gaps are gonna be there. So we'll see. He's definitely one of the most intriguing players in all of baseball, just because nobody can really quantify his game. But at the same time, I think the Reds, you have to play him.
I agree.
You need to play him. You may not be ready, but if you're gonna bust on a player, you need to let him bust.
Well, the good and bad thing about the situation is the good thing is his defense will carry him to not be a negative in the field, and if he gets on base, he's going to be positive.
Could you imagine?
And you keep on the roster as well for pinch running situations if he ever needs a day off.
Yeah.
Like you bring him in, and then you just take out your Marasco, and you let him steal 2 bases to get a tying run or a game-winning one because you have Brian Pena, who you picked up from the Tigers, who's a solid backup catcher.
Yeah.
So in the pinch-running atmosphere, he can be really effective, which is what he did a lot of last year.
Yeah, and they really need guys like Frazier to step up. He's never really been that great in the minor leagues, only hitting .240 in AAA, but he did have a good year last year, batting .280. He's or 2 years ago, excuse me, about last year he batted .237, so he really needs to get back to that spot. They're really counting on him. I do think that the shortstop is going to be a little bit of an issue. I think Zach Cozart's a solid player, but I mean, hitting .254 with a .284 OBP, that's downright embarrassing.
Yeah, that's Matt Wieters bad from an on-base perspective.
Just really bad. So unless there's some improvement there, you might even want to put Hamilton back in that spot because Schumacher or Heisley
They're not good.
Heisley's okay though. He's a good replacement level outfielder. Not in center, but Bruce could cover center probably. He's got a lot of speed, or decent speed, and he's played it before. But I think that I'm just saying, like, for spot situations, because we both really like this pitching staff. Cingriani is just absolute beast.
He's so fun to watch.
Such a steal. Had a 17K per 9 at one point in the minors.
Yeah, his off-speed stuff is incredible.
He's just so good. He was second-round pick, right? Or third-round pick.
Tony Cingrani is 6'4", 215, and he uses every inch of that 6'4" frame.
Yeah.
He's the type of pitcher who doesn't throw 98, 97, but he has such crazy movement that he can get tons of strikeouts. He reminds me of a modified John Smoltz.
Really?
Where he just has tons of movement on his pitches.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. He's they pretty much stole Latos from the Padres.
Yeah.
I don't even know what they gave up for him.
They gave up Yonder Alonso. I know that was one of the big pieces that they gave up. And he has not panned out for San Diego like a lot of their prospects for various reasons. But we're here to talk about Cincinnati.
Yeah, hopefully Cueto has a bounce back year. He's been barred by injuries last year and a little bit the year before. That delivery, that it's always been rather unconventional. He may have to change that, and that may take away some of the deceptiveness in his pitching because he's never really been that guy that overwhelms you with his stuff, quote unquote. So I think he's going to have to continue to locate and possibly change that release a little bit. So that'll be interesting to see how that unfolds.
Maybe lose some weight.
Yeah, possibly lose some weight. I mean, he is 217 pounds at 5'11".
And as most of you know, in any sport, the height and weights are usually listed taller than you are and lighter than you are.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if he has 5'10", 235.
And if Cingrani is 6'4", 215, and he's 5'11", 220 even, like that's not the best sign. But the great thing about it is that Cueto's now pretty much, in effect, your fourth best pitcher. That's nice.
That is nice, but
when
you're fighting for the playoffs and you're going up against, the St. Louis's, the Pittsburghs, the Angels, the Dodgers, these teams that you're fighting for playoff spots and wins, is it an issue when you get into the playoffs that you don't have a true number one ace that you can match up to Wainwright and Kershaw and Cliff Lee and teams like that?
I would say it can be an issue. I don't think it's the biggest issue. It's obviously going to present a little bit of a problem in those single elimination games.
Right.
But I would be very surprised if Latos or Cingrani couldn't go head to head with one of those guys in the playoffs. Like, I think Latos is on the up and up. I really like his stuff. He just kind of reminds me of just a rock star out there. He's just got great stuff. Still so young. He can throw a great fastball. He's got a couple other great pitches he can bank on. I thought he really showed a lot of improvement. Struck out a lot of guys last year. Showed the ability to go deep into games. He's healthy all year. He's never missed a start really since he's been in the league. Never missed a start really.
The good thing about their rotation is they're all under 30.
Yeah, and they're all under like 27 pretty much.
Yeah, and
I mean, Homer Bailey's oldie and he's 28.
even Mike Leakey is a very solid fifth starter. I know that Cingrani's probably going to be the fifth starter, quote unquote, but he's better than Leakey. But I mean, Leakey last year went 192 innings with a 3.37 ERA and a 3 WAR.
Not a lot of strikeouts, but I mean,
he's
his
getting the
walks
job
were right
done.
on par. His walks and strikeouts were the same from the year before.
Yeah,
His just location was that much better. So
yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good solid pitcher.
Now, we like the rotation. What about the bullpen? Obviously, everyone knows about Aroldis Chapman closing games. I don't think there's going to be any issues with people wanting him to start anymore for various reasons. When you look at this bullpen, what do you think about it? I love Chapman. I love Sean Marshall, but for some reason they're just in love with Jonathan Broxton. And then outside of those three, there's not much there.
Yeah, I mean, Marshall's had a pretty good year last year. Nobody's going to take that away from him. He's been solid the last 4 years. I really like him being a setup guy for them, or potentially a long inning reliever. It really depends. He's done a little bit of both throughout his career. Was injured last year, so I mean, he was obviously good in the pitches or places that he did pitch. But yeah, that's going to be a little bit of the question mark here. I guess it's really, I never really put too much emphasis personally on the pen, because I think there's a lot of like minor leaguers that you can throw in there. We talked about one of their top prospects, Stevenson, who we both like.
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of Robert Stevenson. In my opinion, he's potential number 2 starter. And I feel like if they decide that Cueto is not the way to go, and they don't make a move to re-sign him down the road, Stevenson's just going to step up and fill that spot. And that's another thing showing how we were talking about how they're very good at scouting and development.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for them right now, they're very light on batting prospects.
Yeah.
In terms of immediate help. So is this a team that could be right in that Pittsburgh-St. Louis range that makes a move during the year for an additional, in my opinion, probably up the middle player at shortstop?
Yeah,
or maybe even third base.
I think they're a great candidate, or great candidate to go out there and try and steal one of the Matt Kemps or those types of players. Right. It's not really their MO.
If the Dodgers paid a lot of money of that Kemp contract or the Ethier contract, which might be a little bit more realistic, they could be a landing spot. I was thinking Aramis Ramirez. If Milwaukee wasn't in the race, or Chase Headley, who's a free agent after the year, that could be another
I could definitely see
landing spot for them. Because Frazier,
they already have that connection from the Latos trade.
And Frazier had a very good year beginning to the 2012 season, but hasn't done too much consistently. So.
Yeah, I really think that they're a prime candidate for that. I was a little surprised by their lack of. Like, Morales, I think, would even be a good guy for these guys.
Where would he play, though, without DH?
It's a good question. You'd kind of have to talk to Votto about moving.
You wouldn't. You don't move Votto.
I don't know.
You don't move Votto.
I think if you're paying a guy that much money, you should be able to move him wherever you damn please.
But it's a horrible idea. Where are you going to put him? Where are you going to put him?
I don't know.
Exactly. You don't move your star.
I could easily see Bruce moving over to left and him going into right.
You would keep Bruce's arm in right.
Or put him in left? I don't care.
Yeah, I would never do that, but I mean,
sometimes
obviously
you have to get creative. There's also
sometimes you don't need to be crazy though as well. You got to control the creativity.
There's also a lot of trending topics in baseball right now about how much it would revolutionize the sport if you had your best defensive players switching positions all the time per at bat. Like, so say you have like a guy like Ryan Howard who always hits it between first and second.
Well, that's why you just do shifts. You don't have to move the players from in different spots.
That's true. But if you were to have a fielder there, like if you were to move Hamilton into that second base spot just for that at bat. Now this is just a hypothetical conversation, but I think that that's something in the next 25 years that we're going to start seeing in baseball is position versatility. And I think the use of advanced metrics are going to allow for some of those stereotypes to kind of be broken, where guys get moved based on who's at the plate. So, not saying that that's going to happen, but I'm just saying they may have to get creative in this lineup because if you're not able to get a Headley or a Camp that just slots into a position of need, you might have to get creative. Now, I'm not saying you should do that with Votto, but I am throwing it out there as a possible recommendation. I've never seen the scouting report on him in any other position, so I wouldn't bank on it.
The one last player I'd like to bring up that I think may be the most realistic target for this team because of cost and other teams' prospects and potential to not be as good before we go into over-unders is the Cleveland Indians trading Asdrubal Cabrera to the Cincinnati Reds.
Yeah, I could see that.
They have Francisco Lindor on the way. That's a team that also didn't do much in the offseason to improve themselves. If that internal development doesn't help them, they could be out of the race quickly. And with Cabrera also being a free agent, they could like to move him for some pieces.
Who's playing shortstop for the Athletics? Is it Lowry?
Jed Lowry, and then they have Addison Russell on the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That could be another guy, too.
Potentially, but I think Lowry can play second base very effectively, and they may want to keep him.
Because they just traded Weeks. So.
Yeah, well, Weeks isn't that good, but you have Eric
Right.
Sogard, who's not that good at second base, and they would need Lowry
He's good
more
at the
than
plate, though.
they would need Lowry more than Cleveland would need Cabrera, and Oakland's a better team.
Yeah.
They've proven that the last 2 years.
Well, I
winning
just
that
figured
division.
Addison Russell would be close.
Right. I think they're both, on the same timeline trajectory for making the majors. But anyway, let's go with some over-unders. Joey Votto, over-under 30 home runs.
I'm going to say over. I think it's time he carries his team.
I'm going to say over as well. I don't think he will change his approach at all. I just think that he's going to have one of those years where he hits 31, 32 homers instead of 22. He's obviously a great batter, and I think this is well within his reach. Brandon Phillips, over under 90 RBI.
I'm going to go under. I think he's going to really suffer with Chu not being on base almost 50% of the time.
I agree with you 100%. Jay Bruce, over under 35 home runs, which would be a career high for him.
Over.
I agree as well.
I think he's going to continue to get better. I don't think he's ever going to be the player we thought he was, but I think he's going to have a peak between 28 or 27 and 30.
Yep, I think the power in that ballpark is easily reached. Billy Hamilton, over under 60 stolen bases.
Over.
I agree, over, and I
Pending
think he
playing
leads
time.
baseball.
Yeah.
Which is not that big of a stretch, but let's move on to the pitchers. Homer Bailey, over under 3.5 ERA.
Under. With over a 9.5 K per 9.
So in that does he get over 200 strikeouts?
Yes, he does.
So with these good positive numbers, will he be a top 5 Cy Young contender?
Not quite.
Okay.
I don't think he's going to be. I think his walks are still going to be a tad high, and I think that his ERA is not going to be sterling because I think, as much as I like Homer Bailey, sometimes the movement on his fastball isn't doing it for me, but he's got such good velocity and the ability to maintain it throughout games that he's pretty much able to get by on that. So we'll see, but yeah, I don't see him being a Cy Young candidate just because he's too hittable. Like he doesn't paint the corners as much as I would want him to. Like if James Shields had Homer Bailey stuff, he'd be Cy Young like every year.
Yeah, James
That's
Shields is
the type
incredible.
of pitcher Homer Bailey is.
Aroldis Chapman, over under 40 saves.
Over. He's gonna be the guy. He's a freak, athletic, talent, and he's gonna have plenty of opportunities. So.
And last one, Johnny Cueto. Over or under 140 innings pitched. Does he solve the injury bug?
I say yes, he does, because Cincinnati's great at doing what they do, and part of developing talent is knowing what to do with it. So I really hope that they get that solved, and I think they had some growing pains last year, and I think that he'll be healthier.
I will agree, and mainly because the only time he's ever missed significant time was 2013 last year, 60 innings. The year before that, 217. The year before that, 156, then 185. So, I have faith that he will stay healthy, although I don't know if these ERA numbers will continue to be this low. I just, worry about him sustaining his success with the big injury scare last year. So, Moving on to the next team in the division, the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pittsburgh Pirates were the feel-good story of baseball last year. They broke their long-time streak of not making the playoffs. They have a lot of homegrown talent that they have locked up as well in a very smart fashion. They've extended Andrew McCutchen, the face of their team and the National League MVP last year, an extremely good player at manning center field. They have a lot of youth on the way. Pedro Alvarez is the monster power guy. Their outfield is loaded. Their pitching, Garrett Cole, a former #1 pick, started to show a lot of promise at the end of last season. Francisco Liriano, they picked him up on the scrap heap, and he had a really good season. So Kyle Smith, will Pittsburgh be able to continue the feel-good story last year and make the playoffs again, or are they due for a downturn with their financial limitations?
I think the financial limitations are going to hurt them a little bit, but I also think, as we discussed with the Reds, they're probably going to be a prime candidate to pick up somebody halfway through the year. I don't know if they're going to continue this. I don't know if this is the year. Garrett Cole, I hope he makes a step forward. Liriano, the production was nice, but you're going to have a really hard time replacing A.J. Burnett in the pen.
Yeah.
In the starting lineup. But this... I like some of their hitters. I like the fact that Polanco is going to be moving, hopefully, into full-time minutes, or at-bats, excuse me. But I think the progression of starting Marte is something to keep an eye on. McCutchen, obviously MVP candidate every year, probably until the year he falls off, which may not be for several years. Alvarez, I want to say he's in the last year of his deal, right?
No.
Or close?
No. He has 3.
Really?
Yeah.
It's been around that long, huh?
Yeah, he's been around that long, hitting home runs, striking out, playing mediocre third base, being moderately productive.
Yeah, I was gonna say he got up to 36 home runs last year. His OBP was still terrible, but he really seemed to at least figure out how he should bat for him personally, even if it's not always going to be the convention. Which I think makes him a wild card at the plate.
I mean, you know what you're going to get out of Pedro Alvarez as a fan, but as a pitcher, you can't ignore the fact that when you're facing him, if you miss your spot, that ball's going 450 feet.
Yeah.
I mean, you know you're getting 180 strikeouts, you know you're getting bad average, bad on base, but you also know you're getting near 500 slugging.
Yeah.
And it's incredible the power he has, and ideally, he probably needs to move to first base within the next year or two for defensive reasons, but keep him there as long as you can. I mean, just the value you can provide as a power hitting third baseman, it's important.
They're gonna miss that first base production, I feel like.
Yeah, this is a team that while Morneau wasn't that good last year, he also wasn't horrible when they picked him up, but this is a team that if they're serious about trying to sustain this success, should make a 1-year, $6 million offer for Kendrys Morales and put him at first base.
Yeah.
I'm not sold on Gabby Sanchez. I don't think he's that good. He is a failed prospect from the Florida Marlins, Miami Marlins. He was there when they were called Florida, I believe. I'm not sold on Andrew Lambeau, Travis Snyder. I'm not sold on him. I'm not sold on any 3 of them as a platoon. They need more offense.
They need more offense on paper, but I think one of the best things, and we didn't mention this with the Reds, and I apologize to the fans, but one of the things you can't quantify with players is a manager. Clint Hurdle is an incredible manager. I thought he did a great job of putting his hitters in great positions last year, keeping them in counts and letting them know how to work different pitchers and doing what they do. I think Brian Price is going to be a lot better than Dusty Baker in that regard for the Reds. And so I think that that's something you can't really underestimate, because you may be losing Morneau and A.J. Burnett, but you're gaining Polanco, and you're probably actually gaining Garrett Cole for the whole season, which is nice.
Yeah, I think that Polanco is going to make the team out of spring training. He's going to play probably right field every day, and they're going to keep McCutchen in center and keep Marte in left, and they're going to have the best defensive outfield in the majors, and Polanco is going to be Rookie of the Year contender. Yeah. I'm really a big believer in his production and his tools and his potential.
Yeah, no, I really like him. I think this is kind of going to be one of those teams that the thing that I admired about the Pirates last year was how consistent they were. they weren't like one of those streaky teams who would just go out and win a bunch of games. They like consistently night after night won tough games.
Yeah.
I just don't see them doing that again this year.
And speaking of the consistency, their bullpen was incredible last year, and I think that it's still going to be the strength of this team along with defense. Like when Jason Grilli stepped in, fireballer closer, has really had a rebirth in his later years as a closer last year. Big time strikeouts, a lot of saves, really effective. Missed some time towards the middle late part of the year, but really was a nice feel good story as a guy who was 36, 37, finally got the opportunity to be the closer and have quote unquote the pressure and get the job done. And then Mark Mellison, who they kind of picked up on from the scrap heap from Boston, had a monster year last year. 1.39 ERA with 70 strikeouts.
Yeah.
Pitched 70 innings as the main 8th inning guy, and he stepped in as the closer when Grilli missed time, and there was no drop off. So the bullpen is going to be a really big strength of this team again.
Yeah, I look to Morton as a starting pitcher, having another strong year. It just kind of reminds me of one of those guys who get good location. You're going to get what you're going to get out of him. To me, Jeff Locke is a really big question mark here. He pitched 166 innings for the first time, and he had like a 2.17 ERA until the All-Star break, and then he just really fell off the face of the earth. His walks and strikeouts were way too close. He's got great location and a really easy release that he can replicate all day. A little bit undersized, so we'll see how that kind of translates this year. But in order for them to continue that success, they really need him to at least match half of that production that he did up in at least half the season. So, looking at how many ifs Pittsburgh has, I can't really get on board with them having that good of a record again. But at the same time, they're one of those dangerous teams where if they make the playoffs, they've got so many prospects and guys that tend to just come out of nowhere because, let's face it, playing for the Pirates is cool.
Yeah.
They play in one of the most beautiful stadiums in the league. They have
incredible fan base.
Incredible fan base, cool history. Pittsburgh's a tough town, and that's something I feel like you can never underestimate.
Yep.
Like
Russell Martin really fit in well. You might think he's a negative with the bat, and he may be, but the way he controls that pitching staff, his pitch framing, his defense, he's an incredible player. I really wanted to make sure he got mentioned. And then before we do over-unders with this team, I'm really worried about the starting rotation, but to counteract that, they have 3 pitchers on the way who could all step in and be really good. Jamison Talion is a former number 2 overall pick in the Major League Baseball draft who's really starting to put together his pitches outside of the fastball. Tyler Glasnow is a really good pitching prospect they've really developed, and Nick Kingman might be the closest out of the 3 to helping the team now, and I could see him getting called up in May if he doesn't make the team right away. Kyle, just how helpful is that just to have those 3 guys, and they offered a deal to Burnett, he didn't take it, but it's nice to have that to fall back on.
Well, one of the most important things I've always truly believed to my core in sports is it's better to have a dominant something that reacts to something rather than a dominant something that's predicated on attacking. So, like, the pitchers for Pittsburgh, they're really good at reacting to hitters. Like, their hitters, they're constantly having to attack pitchers to create offense, whereas their pitching staff and the fact that they've got all these guys coming up, I feel like just like in the NFL, I feel like a lockdown defense is so much more consistent than like a lockdown offense, if you could even call it that. So I think that their defense is what is going to win them games if they do succeed, and that pitching staff being able to rotate some of those younger guys in, give some of those guys rest. I think that's going to be the biggest point of emphasis for them going into the season is can they get these guys halfway through the season? Can they bring them up? Can they stay healthy? Is Garrett Cole really an ace? We all agree that he's got the stuff, but that does not necessarily mean... I mean, Trevor Bauer's got everything you need. Irvin Santana's had everything you need. It takes guys sometimes a long time to translate.
I'm just going to put this out there. I think Garrett Cole's a top 5 Cy Young contender this year.
Really?
I think he hits over 225 strikeouts. I think his ERA is under 3. I think he becomes the face of that pitching staff. I'm really big on Garrett Cole. I mean, just as you said, when you watch him pitch, he has 3 plus pitches and a 4th that's near above average. Like, his stuff is incredible. He's 6'4", 240. He's never had an injury yet. You know, knock on wood, of course. And the difference between him and Bowers, he's so much more consistent with his release point that he can just repeat his delivery over and over. And he has that workhorse frame from a right-hander. He can hit 98, 99. He has an incredible just off-speed pitches and really good changeup. Like, I'm just a really big fan of Garrett Cole, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he had a out of nowhere to some monster season like Jose Fernandez last year in terms of, you know, reaching that Cy Young status. I'm not saying his stats are going to match Fernandez's or anything. I'm just saying that Garrett Cole could be a Cy Young challenger and contender this season.
Yeah, I don't agree with you at all. I think he kind of reminds me of, like, this is a guy who had 117 innings pitched and only 100 strikeouts. He had almost 40 walks. So to me, I think the stuff is there, but I think at the end of the day...
Well, that's called development, Kyle, if the
No,
stuff's there.
True. But I just don't see him as like a high strikeout guy, which I think is necessary to make a Cy Young push. I think he's gonna struggle in that he's gonna want to get ahead of pitchers or hitters so much that he's gonna get knocked around a little bit because, as you may know, the 96-mile-an-hour fastball is a blessing and a curse. It's that much easier to hit out of the park if you make right contact. I do think that he's going to eventually develop into a very great pitcher. I don't know if it happens this year.
Give me some terms on a bet. We haven't made enough just bets between friends and radio hosts.
All right.
Just give me some terms. Let's
All
really
right.
quick.
Well, let's bring it up real quick. I don't think he'll have more than 170 strikeouts.
I do.
I don't think he'll pitch more than 180 innings.
I do.
I also don't think he will. I think he'll walk over 75 batters.
I could see that.
Okay. I also think his ERA is going to be over 3.5.
I don't agree. So how are we going to, like, we're very opposite ends for, at least this season we can agree we're opposite ends.
Yeah.
Okay, so how are we going to make the steak dinner bet on Garrett Cole?
Do I have to make a steak? I don't hate him that much.
You're taking out the fun of this.
Yeah,
it could be
okay,
a beer,
fair enough.
whatever.
All right.
It could be a pizza. Give me a Domino's when you lose.
Should we do what you said? Should we do the top 5 Cy Young finish?
We could hedge the middle, go 7.
Do they do a 7?
Yes, they do. You're ranked. If you get 1 vote at 10th place, you get a ranking number.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that.
7, I say.
Over under 7.
I say Garrett Cole will be above top 7, 7 and up, 7, 6 and up, and
Yep.
you say it'll be 8 and below.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to shake on this. No one can see except
Yep.
us.
That's a good one. I like that, though. That's a good one because, like, the only thing that scares me is that he's 23 years old already. Like, it just seems to me like if he was that much more dominant, he would have been, like, dominating the college ranks and would have got drafted.
Well, he did dominate the college ranks, and he did get drafted as the number 1 guy. But you can't leave in baseball's draft. You cannot leave. It's high school or as a junior. You can't come out as if you already tried to come out in high school, you can't come out again in freshman sophomore year.
Who was the guy that got drafted in the top 10? Was it Appel and didn't sign?
Yes, and when you don't sign, he went back for his senior year, and then he got drafted again. So.
That's right.
Let's do some quick over-unders because we spent a lot of time already making predictions about Pittsburgh pitcher stats. Francisco Liriano, will he be better than Garrett Cole this year?
No.
Okay, I agree with you, obviously. Andrew McCutchen, over/under 30 home runs.
Over.
Okay.
I think he's going to feel the pressure this year and he's going to perform well.
I will take the under. Starling Marte, over/under 40 steals.
Over. I think he's gonna I think he's gonna play better than he did last year, and I think that Hurdle's gonna. He came from Rangers, right?
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure he did. I think he was our hitting coach.
Either way,
the back-to-back World Series. So I think he's.
No, Clint Hurdle was on the Rockies. The manager. I thought you were talking about Marte. Either way, I'm taking the under on the steals. We don't need to talk about Clint Hurdle too much. He's not that good.
Oh yeah, you're right. The Rockies. I don't know who
Yep.
I'm thinking of.
Pedro Alvarez over under 35 home runs.
Under.
I will take.
Contact's just not consistent enough to get there.
That's an extremely valid point, but I will take the over on that. And the last one, over under 30 saves for Jason Grilli.
Over. I think he continues his success. I really enjoyed watching him pitch last year, and I think he could definitely replicate that, and I think he's found a good spot.
I like him a lot too, but I will take the under. I'm just worried about that age and the injuries that started to pop up at the end of last year. So, moving on to the Milwaukee Brewers. They had a very interesting season last year. Carlos Gomez broke out as a MVP candidate if he was on a real team that was any good. Obviously, the Ryan Braun saga had a somewhat of a period to the end of it with the suspension and the admission finally that he took performance enhancing drugs. Gene Segura started off very hot and then started to really cool down at the end of last season. Lucroy had another solid year but did miss some time because of injuries. Their pitching was a complete disaster from a starting perspective. Kyle Loesch was very good. Outside of that, Yovani Gallardo went backwards. They didn't see the steps forward completely they wanted from Estrada and Peralta. The bullpen might have been the worst in baseball. So, obviously, there's some things they need to improve on. Ramos Ramirez staying healthy will be very important. What are they actually going to get out of Chris Davis now that he's in the majors full-time? Is Ricky Weeks better than his brother when they're both really bad? What are they going to do at first base? Are they really going to start Juan Francisco there? So, Kyle, just Milwaukee's very interesting. There's a lot of, interesting players, but the team in and of itself, in my opinion, is very lacking.
Yeah, they seem like they would be a good prime candidate for Morales because they don't really draft very well. So it's like, why do you even care if you lose that pick? And he would be able to fit in perfectly in first base. I think the true value of this team is in their pitching staff, which isn't even that great. But it's a real bunch of solid 3 to 4 ERA guys. Lucroy is also going to increase the benefit or the value of these pitchers, as he was the best framing pitcher or catcher in baseball last year. Erasmus Ramirez should have a really good season. He's one of the more underrated baseball players year in, year out. Both of us like Carlos Gomez quite a bit. Ryan Braun, I think, should never have taken the steroids because I don't think it helped him as much as it could have helped others. I have a hard time believing Ryan Braun because he lied so deliberately, and so I kind of have like a horrible place in my heart for him. Like I have no interest in seeing him succeed whatsoever. But that being said, this is somewhat of an interesting lineup. I mean, that Segura was a great catch in the Greinke deal.
Absolutely.
Weeks is just one of those guys who could randomly have a good year, so you don't really know if you can count on him or not count on him. The problem is going to be that if they get injury prone at all, they are screwed.
Yeah, they're done. They have no prospects on the way, really. They have no... all their good youth is already playing very prominent roles.
Unless they have just like a bunch of John Freezes in their like system that don't look good in the minors but randomly ball out when they get up there.
Chris Davis was kind of like that, but at the same time, he's a little bit on the older side at 26 already when he got his major playing time last year. But I just feel bad for Ricky Weeks and Jamel Weeks on a lesser extent. Like, these highly touted prospects who just, never could fully develop to their potential consistently, and you just kind of feel for them that they get hated on by a lot of their fans, and, it's just, like, he had a lot of potential.
Yeah, and he's still a solid, everyday second baseman. He's just,
I don't know about that. He has negative WAR the last 2 seasons.
I should have said he's a solid platoon second baseman. I shouldn't have said every day because he could come in there and, he can hit the baseball. It's just seems to be suffering from too many mental blocks because the talent's there.
I could see that. they have a lot of good stuff in that lineup. That Ryan Braun obviously is a very good hitter. Lucroy's a good hitter. Ramos Ramirez is good. Gene Segura is a nice developing shortstop. You'd like to see better on base percentage, but still he's a very good player. Carlos Gomez is incredible. Like, he had just a really, really good year last year. His wins above replacement was 8.4. He slugged .500. I mean, he had 24 homers, 27 doubles, 10 triples, and 40 steals. He had 40 stolen bases, 7 caught stealing, and he played incredible center field defense. He's only 28. He's in his prime. And then it's just when you have these guys in your prime like Gomez and Braun and Lucroy, they're kind of just toiling away into nothingness with, what this organization is doing from a drafting and scouting standpoint. Wouldn't you agree, Kyle Smith?
Yeah, it seems they should be in a relative sell mode.
I agree.
I mean, you've got Gomez, who you probably want to keep. Or actually,
they extended him to a very team-friendly deal, so there's no point trading him now. I mean, but you can get a lot for him, though.
Right.
But when you go out and you sign Garza and Kyle Osh back-to-back years,
And you gave up the pick for Los, didn't you?
Yeah, they did. And you think you're a winner, but you're not. It kind of reminds me, in other sports, I would say, sometimes Dallas does this from time to time. And then in the NBA, I would say a very good example of this is their counterpart, the Milwaukee Brewers. They spent a good amount of money on O.J. Mayo in the offseason, and they extended Larry Sanders. They brought in Gary Neal.
Knicks are like that.
I mean, the New York Knicks are like that, and that's a decent comparison because they both have legit superstars, and they're just missing really key components as well.
Yeah, this is just a team that needs to build up their farm system. They need to wash their hands of the Ryan Braun saga.
Yeah. I think he is the most likely superstar to get traded this season. I think the Milwaukee wants him to establish that he's still really good. He's 30 years old already. They want him to start off really hot, then they're going to flip him.
Yeah, it's going to be contingent upon the market and who's going to want to take on a guy with those question marks and that type of salary.
Well, the salary in today's day and age isn't even that bad, assuming he has the same production he had before.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
that is
obviously.
True. But still, it's north 160 when he signed, right?
Yeah, but he's already 3 years into it.
Yeah.
And he's getting 18 per. For that production,
that's a good point.
It's, fair.
Rangers would probably be all over that.
I don't want to spend too much time on Milwaukee because we're already, closing in past an hour. Let's just do some over-unders for this team and move on to the Lowful Cubs. So, Kyle Smith, Ryan Braun, over-under 30 home runs.
Under.
Over-under 100 RBI.
I say over.
I think that he will hit over 30 home runs and have over 100 RBI, and I also think that he will not finish the year in Milwaukee, and I don't want to handicap a potential trade race or anything, but I just feel like this has the Seattle Mariners making a panic trade all over it.
Yeah,
I feel like they could easily be panicked about all this money they spent. Zaredzak could try to make one last move to save his job. I feel like they could easily trade Taijuan Walker plus more for Ryan Braun and take up the entire deal.
God,
I'm very worried about this.
Oh my gosh.
Anywho, let's get off that negative subject from my perspective. Let's do an over-under for Chris Davis. He had a very solid 100 at-bat sample, short sample size, of course. Chris Davis, will he hit over 250?
I think he'll hit 255.
Okay. Will he get 20 home runs?
No.
Really? He had 11 and 136 at-bats.
I think that he was kind of swinging for the fences.
Okay,
there.
I can understand that. In a team that, not contending, let's show what I can do to get a job.
Yeah.
All right. Carlos Gomez. Can he get 25-25 year? 25 homers, 25 steals.
Absolutely.
Will he do it?
No.
I agree. I don't think he'll have the home runs.
I don't think I'll have the home runs. That's about
I do think he'll do 20-20, though, just like last season.
And I think he could even get 30 bags. I mean,
He had 40 last year.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Gene Segura. He had a very, very great year last year developing, but the on-base percentage is still a little bit of a concern. Does he get it above 340?
No.
I agree with you.
I think he's kind of reminds me. I'm not trying to make this comparison, but he kind of reminds me of Castro in that way.
I agree, but I feel like he reminds me of Jimmy Rollins with a little bit less power.
Okay, I like
That's
that.
what I see out of him in terms of the on base percentage issue and things like that. And let's do one more, and let's do it on a pitcher because their rotation actually is a little bit interesting. No, Giovanni Gallardo, he's free agent at the end of the year. Does he get 180 strikeouts?
No.
I say yes.
Okay.
In 09, 010, 11, and 012, 204 straight years.
Damn,
And then
that's
he
crazy. I would not have guessed.
Yep,
that.
but last year he definitely had a down year, and I think he'll turn it around before he leaves. So
He's a good candidate to try and get him some play.
yeah, he could get traded. Aramis
Restock.
Ramirez could get traded. Kyle Loesch could get traded. I doubt they trade Garza in the first year of the deal, but this is a team that should be selling.
Yeah.
And I don't even think that it should be up for discussion because they're not going to be that good. So talking about the last team in the National League Central, the Chicago Cubs. Let's just get this out of the way. In terms of the talent they have on the current 25-man roster, it is not good. Kyle, would you agree with that statement before I continue?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of what they have around the diamond starting, in my opinion, right now they have 3 players that I would count that should be on a good major league roster in a important stature, potential starters. Would you agree with that?
I think you're pushing it with 3.
I'm
possibly.
probably a bigger fan of Nate Scherholz in a platoon situation than you are, but I assume that you were talking about Castro and Rizzo.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, let's just talk about Castro and Rizzo for a second. Both, in my opinion, had very disappointing years last year. Would you agree?
Yeah, Castro was just horrible.
Castro was really bad. He went from a 3.4 WAR to a negative .6. His on base percentage dropped by 40%. His average dropped by 40%. His hits dropped by 20, and he had 20 more at bats. He just had an atrocious year. He had 9 steals and 6 caught steals. Stop running, Castro. You obviously don't know what you're doing.
No.
Because the year before he had 25 steals but 13 caught steals. His percentage is really bad, and it makes him a negative base runner even though he has decent wheels. He's just not a smart player. And you can see that from Cubs fans where they don't like him fielding, they don't like the way he bats, but they already extended him to a pretty big extension. I mean, do you try to move Castro because you have Baez on the way potentially, or
No. I don't think Baez is really going to stay there.
I agree he won't be at short, but I mean, do you risk it and just move Castro to get more pitching? Because when you look at their prospects, they don't have that many pitching
I
prospects.
think you got to hold on to a guy like that because his value is only going to increase from where it is now. You're not going to get anything for him. He's a buy low candidate for a lot of other teams, which is never a good thing when you're trying to sell. I think the key thing to focus on with the Cubs is who are they going to be able to move and what are they going to be able to get, because they have a lot of guys on the way that are exciting. Baez, they have Solar out in the field, and I think Samardzija is a likely guy. Ooh, that's actually that's a pretty good one. But I think that the guy I'm probably most excited about on this Cubs prospect list is Albert Amora. I think that he could be a potential star, and he's not a lot of people are talking about him because he's not that guy.
Well, he's definitely 2 years away, which is
that was 20.
Yeah, I mean
that's the Cubs' plan, though.
Yeah, that's the issue with this team in terms of not losing the fan base is that Almora 2 years away, Baez at least 1.
Yeah.
Chris Bryant is more ready, but at the same time, where is he going to play?
Why call him up?
Yeah.
And lose that service time.
And then at the same time, I don't think he could stay third. And a lot of talent evaluators, the Keith Laws, Jonathan Mayos, they think he's going to right or left field because he has a very good arm. So do you just keep him in the minors to get him outfield defense time?
Yes.
I mean, I agree. The Garza trade netted a very good pitching prospect at C.J. Edwards, but at the same time, he's inconsistent and he only weighs like 160 pounds.
Yeah.
So he needs to add strength to his frame.
I wouldn't say he's inconsistent, though. I would say he's like the model of consistency. I am a Texas Rangers fan, and I shed a little bit of a tear when we traded him last year. Because
I would say that his time in Double-A with the Cubs last year, he started to lose his delivery a bit, and I think maybe that they were trying to tweak it a bit as well.
Yeah,
but at the same time, he did not. He was better in the Rangers system. I feel like
dominated every single spot he was at.
And so, I mean, what about Rizzo? They also, another player they already extended. Last year he was just, once again, his average dropped 50 points. His on base dropped 20 points. His slugging dropped 50 points. But at the same time, his WAR went up, and I think some of that has to do with the increased at-bats.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it can't be ignored how good he is defensively at first base, and that does not get brought up enough.
No, and that's never getting brought up actually.
Especially with first basemen in general.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, it's an undervalued position.
defensively, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see the scoops, but you don't see them covering range that the second baseman don't get to. You can look at Pujols and Mark Teixeira when they were younger. Of course, for both of them at this point,
Yeah.
very good. Paul Goldschmidt is kind of like the next first baseman that's MVP candidate with really good defense. Freddie Freeman's pretty good over there.
Oh yeah, Freeman.
And I feel like Rizzo is extremely good defensively at first base.
Yeah, he's pretty good. I don't think he's quite on those guys' level yet, but it's easily something he could grow into.
Yeah, because you also get
He's got
smarter.
Such great power.
Yes.
I think he's kind of one of those guys who, as the years progress and the lineups get better around him, he's gonna see a little bit of improvement. But I think if you're the Cubs fans, you just got to stay patient. You got to realize that Epstein knows what he's doing. He built a World Series winner in Boston, and a lot of
He
the
won 2 of them in there.
Yeah, a lot of the prospects that they reaped last year were still his guys.
Yeah.
And the GM's getting credit because of all the 1-year deals he did.
He also did make a couple smart trades. That Gonzalez trade was, and where they also landed very good prospects. But
that was a smart trade, but
it worked out for the Dodgers too incredibly well.
Yeah, but it would never happen in any sport where there's no cap. Like it just
yeah.
And the fact that the Dodgers were even willing to take on that deal at the time was just absolutely insane.
Well, there are, deals like that in other sports, specifically basketball, but because of the salary contracts, they're not as outrageous. Like, look in the offseason, the Golden State Warriors traded 2 future first-round picks to the Utah Jazz to take Richard Jefferson and Biedrins so they could have the cap to sign Andre Iguodala.
Yeah,
so it does happen, but obviously not on that scale.
Yeah, not on like the $190 million scale.
So, and then the third main player that, people care about is Jeff Samardzija.
He's getting traded.
He's getting traded, I agree.
Who they picked up for that reason.
He is a guy that's just has incredible stuff in terms of strikeout potential. And he just...
If he has a good year, he's going to be by high. He's probably going to get the same thing Garza got, though. I don't see him getting much more.
I feel like they could get more value out of him because he has higher ceiling than Garza.
Without the injuries.
Well, in terms of just pure strikeout stuff. Like, if you just look at his stuff, it is near ace-like.
Yeah, he can throw 97.
And his off-speed stuff, his curveball's really good.
Yeah.
His slider's good. His changeup is not on that level, but it's definitely not just a show-me pitch. It's it's average. But I just want to bring up 2 lesser-known players that could show up and be productive this year for the Cubs. Aroldis Vizcaino is a former failed top prospect for the Atlanta Braves who's working his way back from injuries. That's someone who I want you to keep your eye on in the starting rotation for the Chicago Cubs. And in terms of platoon, Nate Scherholtz is a player who is very productive at what he does. And he had 20 home runs last year, and I could easily see him doing that again. And Alcantara, I butchered that name, but he is a shortstop who I think is going to be the starting second baseman moving forward, at least in the near future, probably by May. So is there any just minor guys you want to bring up that are on this roster? Jose Veras is okay as a reliever.
Junior Lake's an interesting guy. He's still only 23 years old. He had a 332 OBP, batted 284, but obviously that was audition time, and we always know audition time is very different than actually playing every day. He did kind of have a large strikeout margin, but at the same time, I don't know, he's a guy that, when you're looking at young prospects, it's such a impossible thing to predict. Well, I shouldn't say impossible, but it's such a hard thing to predict. So.
Baseball is such a crapshoot because so many things can go right or wrong. It's very interesting.
It's all about who you face too.
Yeah.
I mean, you could face like 75% right-handers one year, and nobody talked about it, or you could face 75% left-handers. Just like you never know. Like there's so many variables, and one of the things I'm really excited. For baseball this year is the replay system. I think using all the advanced metrics that it's going to provide teams with as far as first step, Overall distance covered in what amount of time. I think you're really going to see a lot more prospects drafted off those type of stats, and so that's kind of an interesting thing to keep an eye on for you Cubs fans. It might affect some of your drafts. Look to see Hamill traded at the deadline if he has a decent year. They signed him on a 1 year, $6 million deal.
They could even move Varys.
Yeah, they could. Yep. I like their Arrieta pickup. I was a little surprised Baltimore gave up on him so quickly. I still think he's got decent stuff, so maybe he's a guy that they look to flip as well. But this team's just in sell mode.
Yeah, let's just do a couple quick over-unders because I don't want to spend too much time talking about a team that has no shot at contending this year, but could be interesting because of the youth. Anthony Rizzo over/under 25 home runs.
Over.
Okay.
He's going to be swinging for the fences
I agree.
all the time.
I agree. Starlin Castro, will he bounce back?
No.
I disagree.
What's
so
bounce
you
back
so now that I disagree, let you sit in the host chair for a second. Throw some over/unders at me just on Castro.
So over/under 285 batting average.
Over.
Really?
Yep, he's going to bat about 295 but have an OBP of about 320.
Okay, that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, it's not going to be. He's not going to fix the walk issue. He never will.
Over/under 125 strikeouts.
Over.
Okay. It's only been over once so far, so that'll be interesting. Over/under 35 doubles.
I will take the over on that.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Now here's the next great question. Over/under 3 WAR.
See, the WAR thing's interesting because he's not that good defensively and he doesn't walk. So I will take the under on the WAR question.
Okay, sweet.
Yes.
Well, you kind of already said 320 OBP, but
Yeah.
over/under 330 OBP.
Under.
Under? Just
Yeah.
under, or
I don't. I think he'll be
325
up
OBP.
under. I think like 322
Okay.
give or
Alright.
take, obviously. But yeah, I just.
I know, I feel you.
And then I'll let you finish up. Throw me a Jeff Samardzija one, and then we'll call it a good day on the NL Central, and then we'll start prep on the American League Central.
Which we're totally going to deliver to you guys today. You're welcome. We're not going to leave you guys hanging. So, over/under on Jeff Samardzija will give you 3 solid ones. Over/under 199 innings pitched.
Over.
Okay.
But they all won't be with the Cubs, if you want to reaffirm that.
Okay. Over/under 3.5 ERA.
Under.
Under. Okay. Over/under 210 strikeouts.
Over.
Over, huh? And well, I said 3, but let's go for one more. Over/under 80 walks.
Under.
Under.
He'll get the walks a little bit under control, which will contribute to the rise in strikeouts.
He had 78 last year, which is the most he's ever seen. But
Yeah.
last year he pitched 213 innings, which was he's never even gotten close to. Well,
Yeah.
I mean he got somewhat close the year before, but so. Thank you very much to everybody who tuned in today. I'm Kyle. This is Josh over here. Anything else you want to add before we say goodbye?
Nope. Deuces. Enjoy.
Deuces!